We've all said for a number of years that we intimately understand that a consumer is an integral part of the beef business. And so our next speaker is really going to address some recent trends that are going on with our consumers, some changes that many of you are probably aware of if you live in a city like Manhattan, Kansas. If you hail from Garden City, some of these changes might be forthcoming in the near future. So we're very fortunate to have with us Don Close. He's a senior analyst with Rabo AgriFinance. He works specifically in the animal protein sectors, in more specialized within the beef side. Prior to joining Rabo AgriFinance, he was involved with the Texas Cattle Feeders Association, has held a variety of positions in the cattle feeding industry with corporate feed yard industry, has conducted research with them for quite a number of years on a wide range of topics, confinement cow-calf operations, lean fine textured beef, and has most recently, authored some papers that address consumer trends. And so with that, I'd like to welcome Mr. Don Close to the podium.
Good morning. I'm absolutely pleased to be here this morning. I'm one of those West Texas A&M grads, one of those Division I guys. We've all, big Division II guys. You guys have always impressed us, but just the heritage and the history of this institution, I'm very pleased to be here. I was thinking, sitting back there this morning, I've been in this game for about 42 years now, and luckily, every paycheck I have ever had has been directly or indirectly from cattle. And if you take the downsizing of our industry, if you take the attrition that we have seen in the industry over the last 35, 40 years, I'm very proud to be here. But the reason that I got to thinking about that is I cannot think of a time that I have been more optimistic for animal agriculture and specifically North American beef industry as I am right now. And I want to clarify that because along with the years that I've been in the game, I cannot tell you as an analyst, I cannot tell you a time that there is more moving parts, and certainly never a time there's been as much noise in the market as there is right now. And when I talk about why I'm so optimistic for the industry, I'll go into some of those details right now, but it's largely where U.S. and North America is positioned for the future of global trade. I'd also bring up the point, we've been expanding the U.S. cow herd now for going on our 5th year. We've added 6 million head to the inventory. We're very high in this cattle cycle. We're very close to the peak. So I don't want to be misleading or confused. It's still a commodity market. It's still a cyclical market. So it's not cash fundamentals that I'm talking about, but it's where U.S. and North America is positioned for the future. Working for the bank, I'm lucky enough I get to do a lot of international travel and gain perspective. I spent May this year in Australia and New Zealand. It was the 5th time that I've been there, and I can tell you what you're seeing in the press in regards to the severity of the drought is absolutely for real. And I've read articles in the last week, 10 days, that they're referencing because of They never had the ability to recharge subsoil moistures, and the heat waves they've had, it's dried out pasture conditions faster than normal. So they're referencing it as a drought on steroids or a 500-year drought. And their projections right now is that they will be forced to liquidate another 2 million females before they get weather conditions stabilized. It's tough. It's a tough situation. So when I look at the global beef trade, and before I even go there, when I started to add this component to consumer trends, I first had the thought that, am I coloring outside the lines, and does that really fit the profile of the topic I've been asked to address this morning? And the more I thought about it, I would argue with you, it absolutely matters. It is consumer trends. And I can tell you that my job as an analyst, and I speak to groups, average probably 3 days a week. The first thing most people want to hear from me is price outlook. And if I don't give them what they want on price forecast, they would like to go home with something they can take home and apply to their farm or ranch that they can improve value. The hardest message we have to deliver as ag speakers and ag analysts is how the international trade influences you on your farm. And we are there. And we are not going back. That it's just one of those requirements. You can like it, dislike it. That's not the point of this discussion. The point is the levels of U.S. product that is being exported today, and where that came from in 2003 with the BSE event, to breaking the 10% of production barrier in 2017, and year to date we're running about 11.5% of our production being exported. It's an incredible story. So when I look at the global picture today, the 3 countries that I find the most interesting are Mexico, Indonesia, and India. And the reason that I say Mexico is the pace in which Mexico is developing commercial cattle feeding and developing commercial beef processing is unbelievable. I can tell you the technology that they're implementing in the beef plants in Mexico today is superior to anything I see in the States. And I talked to them about it and say, this is pretty cool, what are you doing, man? And I said, if the U.S. has a food safety issue, you say you're sorry, you might get shut out of a country for a while, but you're fine. If we have a food safety issue, we don't get a second chance. We got to do it right the first time, and they're doing it. And I would encourage you, as we go forward, don't think about the U.S. market exclusively. Start thinking the North American market collectively. Now, while we're here, it's it's not the point of my conversation today, but while we're here, I have absolute confidence we will reach a successful conclusion to NAFTA 2.0. I have zero confidence of the timeline we're going to get that done on, but we will get there. The reason that I say Indonesia is they've got an ag policy that changes about bi-weekly. And what happens is that food prices will go up and the consumers will start boycotting and protesting. So the government will open up exports or imports and bring in a lot of product. Food prices go down. Then the farmers take their turns of protesting in the street. The government cuts off the imports, and it's just this constant teeter-totter back and forth. We cannot guess it. But they've compounded to that. Because in 2017, Indonesia opened a tariff quota of 50,000 metric tons of Cara beef from India. Now, Cara beef is water buffalo, and it will sell for about 70% of the international clearing price of 90% lean trim. So that gives you a benchmark, kind of where we're at. It's not beef as any of us in this room would acknowledge, but it's beef. All right. Indonesia, and they expanded that import quota in 18 to 100,000 metric tons. Historically, Indonesia has been a large importer of Australian feeder cattle. They feed them, process them, use them domestically, and export. But that is absolutely wrecking the exports of feeder cattle from Australia to Indonesia because of the success they've had in selling the impact the carb beef's having. All right, India. There are basically we're to a point that rounded we can say that India and China both have a human population of 1.4 billion people. Now, India is a third the size of China. And on top of that 1.4 billion people, they have a cattle inventory, including the water buffalo, 300 million head. How do they cram it all in there? And what are they going to do with it? But here's why it's significant. India's population is about 80% Hindu, about 15% Muslim, and the balance is everybody else. And they have this massive row of the Hindus are currently in control of government and are absolutely anti-animal agriculture, to the point where even being caught with, in some provinces, processing is absolutely banned. Some of those provinces, if you are caught in possession of fresh meat, you will be jailed. And there's frequent stories of Muslims in livestock trade being beaten and killed. Now, if you have a conviction of something that's so strong that you're willing to beat or kill somebody, do you really give a damn what the law is? You know, it's just how extreme they are. But the exports of that product, basically, if you just draw a horseshoe around India, Vietnam's a big one, Egypt, but that's where that product's going. But okay, I'm going to try to wrap this up and move on. I think if you take the 80% choice and prime carcasses that the U.S. is averaging currently. Now, short-term seasonality and all, we're running about 77%. But on an annual basis, we'll be on top of 80%. We got the North American component that I've already talked about. The U.S., and why I said I'm so optimistic, is North America is pristinely positioned to be the provider of quality and ultra-high quality product globally. And at the same time, India is because and that growth is coming before their demand for most of their animal protein comes from dairy products, and it's that growth in the dairy sector that the used cows and the male calves are byproducts that they can sell in the open market. So it's for the dairy is why it's expanding, but they're going to be the supplier of the commodity product. So we've got these benchmarks. North America's the ultra high quality producer, India's the commodity of commodity, and if you take the other major beef exporting countries, they're constantly going to be tugged with, do we cut cost to compete with the low-end producer, or do we add all the bells and whistles to compete with North America? And they're just constantly going to be swayed back and forth. It doesn't matter where you go, you hear a lot about this, but if we truly believe, I mean, just seeing that thing graphed is pretty impressive. But if we truly believe we're going to have a global population of 9.6 billion people in just 30 years from now, we had better be producing every level of protein we can. And when I say that in that collective form, there's a lot of things I don't agree with and how they're presenting the products, but the argument of should we or should we not be promoting plant-based proteins and lab-based proteins, I say go for it. on production. Where I do have a differing opinion is I am in agreement with NCBA that they should be under the regulatory authority of USDA and meet the same regulations as the meat industry. And I think the labeling, they cannot be called beef or meat. But for the product, go for it. One last point in that and I'll move on. We've had quite a variance of opinion within the bank on those products. And we've got a group of analysts within the bank who are absolutely advocates for their development. But where our biggest disagreement has come from is the advocates of those products think that today's high-income, high-mobile millennials are the target audience for those products. And my argument is that group of consumers is about as fickle as a 10-year-old. And by the time those products are actually commercially viable, that group of consumers will be on to the next and greatest thing, whatever that might be. But I see the real potential for those alternative products is the 300 million emerging middle class from China and Southeast Asia. All right, that's enough global. I'm going to start talking the U.S. What this slide is, it's from the St. Louis Fed, and this is the yield curve. Now that's banker jargon for the difference in interest rates between 2-year notes and 10-year notes. And when we talk about the flattening yield curve, all we're talking about is when the economy gets so revved up and so moving so fast that short-term risk are a bigger issue than 10-year risk, interest rates start to escalate. That's all it is. That's all we're talking about. But you can see from this slide that there is batting 1,000, when that yield curve goes to parity or inverts, it will lead to U.S. recession. And it's 100% last of the 8 recessions has been led by flattening or inversion of the yield curve. And you can see from this chart, we're going towards a flat yield curve at a breakneck speed. That's a really big number. Well, that's a big number. 21,344,744,890,576 and a nickel. Now, for entertainment sometime, go to usdebtclock.com. And if you think an electric meter spins fast in Houston on a late afternoon, that debt clock, and you can't even keep, I couldn't write this number down because it's changing too fast. But here's my point. Servicing that debt alone is going to be enough to drive that interest rate higher. Now here's the crazy part about that. As big as that number is, our GDP is so strong. The U.S. debt to equity ratio, we can handle that much debt. I don't want to come across as overly pessimistic or bearish because of the level of debt, because we've got productivity at a level we can feed it. All I'm saying is we got to pay the bills. And paying those bills is going to mean interest rates will probably work higher. That's going to affect consumer behavior. If that's not enough, this is the existing home sales. And I could spend the hour talking about, we don't really have an opportunity. If you take the student loan debt and you take the auto debt, the millennials don't have the cash flow to buy a house. And then you take the argument that we quit building starter houses and we built a full generation of McMansions, and it's just too big a leap from an apartment to the McMansion and all that stuff. But the bottom line, my opinion of this chart right here, consumers are, while we talk about how good this economy is and unemployment at 3.8% and all the good stuff, there's red flags showing up in this economy. Auto sales, same story. Now, the cars last longer, we drive less. We got fewer fewer young people are interested in driving. I mean, there's a lot of reasons there, but red flag. All right, so since the last recession, the U.S. has increased total cattle numbers by 6 million head. And over that period of time, that's a period of economic expansion, we've had the premium burger craze, and we've got the existing demand for high-end and ultra-high-end middle meats that show no softening whatsoever. We've had the introduction of meal kits. We've had home delivery of restaurants is the fastest growing sector of that whole food delivery space. We've got the click and pick thing where you go online, buy your groceries online, just drive by and you got the place, they throw them in your car and they've already got your credit card on file. You don't worry about pay, just throw it in the car and drive off. Cool. The restaurant apps craze, and not only restaurants directly, but OpenTable, Yelp, the number of places that you can make reservations and even order your meal before you get there, so it's ready when you get there. Who's been to one of the major airports with the new app service that you can order from any restaurant in the airport and your meal is delivered to your gate as you're boarding so you can eat the restaurant food on the plane? For a guy that flies constantly, that's pretty cool. I will take any opportunity to duck out on eating airline food. That's pretty cool. So here's my point. All of this expansion, all of these bells and whistles, all of these drivers in our market right now have been added during a period of economic growth. We have not stress tested this market with a contracting economy. Now, I don't want to in any way imply any of these bells and whistles are going to go away. I don't believe that's true. In fact, I think we'll see more and more come along. But I do think that we will see a stress test in how consumers behave if a dual income household loses one income, if a single household earner starts losing overtime hours, if all of those things that happen during a period of recession, how are they going to respond? And I'm not saying, I'm not talking doom and gloom here. I just think if I were a producer and looking at where to take my business in the next 2 to 5 years, I would probably be a little bit cautious. That's all I'm saying. It's not doom and gloom, it's just be a little cautious. All right, so if I hadn't scared the hell out of it enough already, I'm going to bring you back around, and it's not all bad, but this growth is quarterly, but it is the expenditures on food services and accommodations. And, over time, we've seen the number of meals eaten away from home slightly have an advantage over the meals eaten at home. And it's not that we've seen that much increase in raw commodity prices or food prices as much as it's the addition of service. This is a monthly chart, different timeline, but that is the expenditures on food. Same story. Think about I'll get to the meal kit thing, but think about all of the pre-cut sliced fruit and veggies in the store. Think about the service that's provided with the various meat items. Think about the abandonment of the center aisles of the store to shopping around the peripheral edges. All of that's driving that food price up. Now, I'm getting a little out of context here, but, I'm going to wait on that. I'm going to explain to you in a bit with a better demonstration, but as we spend more and more time at home, I think we will see the number of the meals at home regain the lion's share over meals away from home. And again, I'll get to why I think that's true. this is when I was robbing the St. Louis Fed's website of all their graphics for this presentation. I stumbled on this one. This is open jobs or job postings in the food service and accommodation level. Now I know you're seeing it here, and I can tell you when I drive across town, my grocery store, my dry cleaners, my fast food restaurants, there is not a business in St. Louis that doesn't have a help wanted sign out there. And we got an unemployment rate 3.8%. We got this whole argument over people that have exited the job market and are just now coming back in, and we got more players, all that stuff, noise. Look at the number of jobs. It's incredible. Now, just as a economist or technical trader, I can look at that and say, it might be running, you might be ready to see a little bit of the high-speed wobbles show up here. It might be running a little too rich, but that's impressive. You got that many open jobs. All right, so I'm going to start talking the meal kits piece, and simply, if we take the old line of success in real estate is determined by location, 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 we can change that to success in the food service business is going to be determined by convenience, convenience, convenience. There's certainly a perception of transparency with the meal kits, and why I say that exactly that way, because I'm not convinced it's anything more than a perception, but if a consumer believes it, go for it. Time savings for online shoppers. And then better position to offer food with a story. So when I was working on that, I didn't even really think about it while I was researching and writing that report. But once it was out, I got to thinking, you can't talk to anybody. You cannot talk to a living soul today that tells you they don't have time to they're always busy. And well, what the hell are we doing? What's that time eater? Now, one of the things that I often ran into, and Glenn and I had breakfast this morning and talking about time with kids. One of the stories that frequently comes up is they say, young parents today spend twice the amount of time with young kids as my generation did when we had children at home. And I look at how my kids have turned out, and I'm not so sure that spending a little more time with them isn't a pretty good idea. But really, U.S. is 5th on the list here, I think, 5th or 6th. We're spending 7.5 hours a day in front of a monitor. Now that's a desktop, that's a handheld, that's TV, that's mobile devices, that's 7.5 hours. That's where our time's gone. So this chart's 2017, and you can see there that it's a pretty impressive list of store closings in 2017. I tried to update this slide, and it was really muddy because of the Sears and J.C. Penney's and a lot of these stores that announced closures in 2017, and they're still at it in 18. So, as the numbers, where the numbers fall, but there's better than 3,300 stores on this list. Brick and mortar shopping is going away. So I'm not really concerned with the level of sales here, but you look at that slide on your left, and that's annual net sales in yuans from Alibaba. And Alibaba is owned by a guy by the name of Jack Ma, and in simple terms, they're the Chinese version of Amazon. And there's another company over there, that JD.com. Both of them argue they're the largest online shopping service in the world, but I think when you cut through the noise, I think Alibaba's probably got that spot. The second one is the growth rate in Amazon. Remember back when Jeff Bezos had this idea of selling books online, and we were all used to going to Barnes & Noble and that ain't gonna make it. Jeff Bezos just took over Bill Gates as being the wealthiest man in the world. And you ain't seen nothing yet. Now, I can get some pushback on this slide because, well, Don, that's everything. You know, Amazon's logo, the A to Z store, they sell everything. It's not just food. I agree with that. And I'll go so far as food's a minor share of that online sales. But my real takeaway, does it matter? I'm not talking items, I'm talking trend line. Now, contrast. Your left is annual sales for Walmart. And you can see that for 5 years now, those sales have essentially been flat. And I can share with you that their online efforts to date are incorporated in those numbers. If it weren't for online sales, Walmart's net sales would be lower. And then on your right is Whole Foods annual sales, and it's a shorter history, and it's flattened out, not quite as rad. You know, that's been the darling of the millennial crowd, and the organic naturals. You know, that's their love life there, and it's not really much better than Walmart. Now, it's muddier because in June of last year, Amazon bought Whole Foods, and now we've got to pull the Whole Foods sales out of the Amazon sales, and it's going to get muddy. But it's very blatant. The transition is well underway. We're going to be buying our food online. And as a result of that, we have an extraordinarily high risk of conventional grocery stores closing. Just this week, there was an announcement that H-E-B's taken one of their poor-performing stores in inner city Houston and turning it into an online delivery point. And I think that's just the beginning. All right, so we got $1.5 trillion spent on food, with just over half of that going from meals away from home. 25% of the shopping malls in the United States are expected to close within the next 5 years. 25%. And I actually live in Chesterfield, Missouri, which is a suburb just on the west side of St. Louis County. And Chesterfield was hubbed by a mega mall that's closed. And the city is now trying to figure out, how do we repurpose this space? Do you tear it out completely? Do you tear down all but the core and put small business, offices, and more residential space in there? But the city's we're starting to see articles in the local paper of just how much it's going to cost the city of Chesterfield to do that. And it just sold, and it was in receivership, and it just sold. I can't tell you how big this thousands of square feet this thing was. It sold for $13 million. Think about buying a mega mall for $13 million. Okay. Meal deliveries from conventional restaurants, we've already talked that one. Online shopping. When I talk about that meals at home, away from home thing, if we close the malls, as technology for streaming entertainment gets better and better, and we watch movies at home, we've got less and less reason to leave home. And think about the frequency that you had meals away from home being out at the mall, or you had meals at home because you'd been out for a movie or an evening's entertainment. You can do that at home. That's why we'll see that transition back to a slight advantage of meals consumed at home. All right, the meal kits. There is not a day goes by that somebody in this arena doesn't have a press release of changes that are occurring. This is the most fluid market space I have ever seen in my life, and I can assure you it is overly ripe for consolidation. And the one that most people have heard the most about there is Blue Apron, and they've certainly spent the most on advertising. About a year ago, they did their IPO, and the expectations were that they would see a launch price on that stock of about $25 a share. It opened at $10. And since that time, those shares have lost about 75% of their value. Now, we just had the announcement that Blue Apron is selling their meal kits at Costco stores and are going for both online and in-store and dual purposes. You've got Home Chef up there at the top. They were actually one that I tried, and then they have recently been bought out by Kroger. You got Chef up there. They've closed entirely. They've been rebought by somebody, but an investment firm, but they're just sitting on it trying to figure out what to do with it. Plated has partnered with somebody. NCBA and American Food Stores launched a meal kit product that's in like 1,500 stores. Even NCBA is in on this game, which is a good idea. HelloFresh is a German company. They've been targeted for the first one to actually be profitable. And they had a press release just this week that, they're going to roll that expectations of profitability into 2019. Now, the thing I do, if you're looking at trying any of these, HelloFresh, their beef products are from Greater Omaha. Just the connection and knowing the processor, Tracy, no offense, but it's good product. I mean, other than some of it, so compared to some. Remember Mark Bittman was the food critic was the organic, natural, anti-red meat food critic with the New York Times, and left the Times to go into private business. He started that Purple Carrot. They've since fired his ass. He's out on the street again. But you can see the liquidity in this space, and it's far, far from over. But where it looked, when this started and when I did my research piece, I gave a strong bias to the success of the meal kit companies and the online model at the expense of grocery stores. And over the year, basically 8-9 months since I published mine, the grocery stores are taking more control of offering their own meal kits or carrying somebody else's. So I think it's a smart move by the brick and mortar stores. All right. Here's just a population breakdown by demographic groups. And, we've known for a while that population-wise, millennials had overcome us boomers. There's a handful, there's some millennials in the room. I can tell you guys that as somebody right in the middle of the baby boom, we were the largest generation of people in the world. All of the advertisers, all of the shopping, all manufacturing was dedicated to our whims because we were the largest and most influential group of consumers in the world. We've been in second place on head count for a while. 2018 is the year that the millennials earning purchase power and income levels exceed boomers. Boomers, we're out. We're just toast, man. They might as well turn us out to pat. We're done. Now, I've heard some, the Gen Xers and the Gen Zers, there's really some interesting stuff on their behavioral differences between the millennials. And what they're trying to pull out of there is that they're actually way more accountable and responsible than the millennials, and I'd be for that. But you know, that just gives you some distribution on how this is breaking out on age demographics. All right, so saying, we already talked June 17, Amazon bought Whole Foods, and that was received by industry as the opening of the floodgate for online shopping. In reality, Peapod started home delivery of groceries in Chicago in 1989. That whole industry had been percolating for 30 years before we had this overnight success. So there's a lot of history there. Current estimates of online groceries were only 2 to 4% last year. We're talking 20-25% by 2025. That might be light. It could go faster than that. Escalating competition, conventional stores, we've already talked some about that. So what does this mean to cattle and beef industry? The pros, it can introduce beef to light and non-beef eaters. Basically, we can use the online services as a gateway drug, get them to eat more beef. That's cool. And if you subscribe to those services and you look at those high glossy pictures of what those meals are and a paragraph or two of just how delectable they are, I'm telling you, they'll tempt you. They do, you know, the marketing there is good. I've looked for this number. I've talked with the NCBA. Somewhere I have in my head that the average consumer limits their meat, not beef, meat purchases to 6 different cuts because that's their repertoire of what they know how to cook and what they're comfortable with, and they're not going to disappoint their family or friends or spend $20 on a conventional chuck roast and not be able to eat it. It's an avenue. Every one of these meal kits has easy step-by-step instructions. My initial concern with cons is if you take any household that's ever been on a budget, and I was concerned, and you take the economic competition, every one of these meal kit companies has sustainable, natural, feel good, every phrase imaginable on them. And at the end of the day, the real price separator between all of them is price per plate. And my concern was that there is just a whole lot of beef items that would be cost prohibitive to be competitive with the other proteins. That I thought beef could really be out of position. But the more I thought about it, the ability to use a number of the underutilized cuts of beef in items and give them step-by-step instructions on how to cook an item they would never buy on their own, and any increase in value we have in those underutilized beef cuts, it'd be a direct pass-through back to cutout values. The better I liked it. The better I liked it. All right. A conventional U.S. grocery store is between 30 and 50,000 square feet. And within that square footage, there is 250 to 300,000 different SKUs or items. Out of 3 million offered. One day last winter, I was working with one of the bankers in Nebraska, and it was so cold, and we had to stop and get gas, and I wasn't going to stand out there in that pump. It wasn't my car. I went inside, man. But while I'm in there, I'm just cruising the aisles. There were 15 different kinds of Reese's in a convenience store on I-80 in Nebraska. How in the hell is that possible? You know, you got the regulars, you got the chunkies, you got the jumbo family size pack, you got little M&M kind. I had no idea. So, you know, the beauty of this online deal is there's basically no limitations. They're not limited to that 250 to 300,000 items. You can theoretically have access to all 3 million. Do a lot of clicking, but all 3 million. Okay, online groceries, a conventional meat case in the United States today is principally the bottom third of choice. And in that product, you will have a limited amount of select product for the value shopper, and depending upon the store and the neighborhood, varying degrees of branded or CAB products, and that's our choice. But if we go online, you're not limited by that amount of cooler space in that store. You know, the ultra high quality products available, breed specific products available, natural, NHTCs, organic, grass fed. It's a big umbrella. Now, I certainly have my biases to the industry and my bias of eating preferences of what beef I like, but it's a big tent. It lowers the barriers of entry for the small independent producers, whether that be an ultra high quality product producer, whether that be a grass-fed guy. This whole buy local thing just drives me crazy. Farm to plate. Isn't all food farm to plate? I don't get that one. Okay. Oh, I'm about to wrap this up. So, over my years at the bank, I've taken on a number of fairly controversial topics, and as a result of that, I've become way more astute of figuring out when I land on a topic, just who am I going to piss off this time? You get smarter when you get old, I'm telling you. But, you know, my original concern was the real pushback on this whole transition to online deal would probably be the big four packers. And why I say that is, you know, our plants today with the size of, let's just say 2,500 to 5,000 cattle a day, they're designed for everyone to be the same and process them as consistently and as rapidly as possible. They don't like the starts and stops. They don't like the break point and cleanups. They don't like the cost that the conventional packer have with having to inventory and account for all of the additional SKUs, and then just increase physical space to handle all these additional niche boxes of product. I really had surprisingly little pushback on this one. I pretty well had, I mean, if anybody was really upset with this one, they stopped short of coming to me with it. As I've thought about it more, I probably would have added conventional retailers to that list, because clearly the meal kit's success takes away from the brick and mortar store. Local, St. Louis, the two big chains are Schnucks and Deerbergs, and I'm a Deerberg shopper. And I've talked to my local store manager about this stuff. I gave him a copy of the report, and I said, when are you going to start carrying these? He says, why do I have to carry those? I've got everything that's in there available today. So I don't know if there's pushback as much as just a lot of conventional retailers are slow to the game, but I think they have some pushback. So what does that mean to you guys? So traditionally we've got the price spread between weight classes and quality grades of cattle. And this way. Mark had that premium and made a big point out of the premium and discount schedule in his presentation, did a very good job with it. But so to date, that premium and discount schedule is basically consists of yield grade differences and quality grade differences. But we're going to add to that price premium and discount schedule of naturals, NHTCs, you name the combination. It's going to be just like stacked traits and seed corn. We can add as many of these characteristics as you want. So Our conventional price spread of cattle quality is not going, I believe will be wider because of this drive for quality. And I don't know if it's so much premium for the really good cattle as we're finally going to figure out a way to dock the absolute hell out of that plain Jane commodity steer. But we're also going to increase that premium and discount schedule with the amount of bells and whistles that are included. About to wrap this up. All right, so what consumers want to know? They want food with a story. I'm not convinced I care if the story is right or not. I don't know that they know if the story's enough to know if the story's right or not. They just want a story. Traceability, sustainability. They want antibiotic free. They want hormone free. They want it to be humanely raised, and they want it to be convenient. But more than any of that, they want it to be affordable. Now, you can take this list here, and I'd say, please don't shoot the messenger. I'm not saying I believe in all these things, but that's what the consumer wants. But if there's any one of these that I would really encourage the industry to take on today that would do us so much good, both domestically for not only for consumer inquiries, but for security and animal health issues, but it would also open a floodgate to countries we can get into with export product, implement traceability. I think if I ask everybody in this room a definition of sustainability, I'd get a different definition from everybody here. Tom's worked in that area more some, so it's just yeah, we're going to get there, but kind of like eating all food farm to plate. We're doing it. Okay. Here's my point here. I'm going to wrap this up. Currently, the industry has the momentum of 5 years of herd rebuilding. We've got the growing beef demand. We've got the impact from incredible beef, the improvement in beef quality and consistent eating experience every time. Expanding exports. We've got the renewed acceptance of beef as it's okay to eat red meat and it's okay to eat some animal fats. That's okay. So here's my close. The industry's at a crossroads. We got the momentum on our side. We can use this leverage opportunity to create our own way into this changing consumer environment, or we can do nothing. You're going to have to decide the answer to that one. Thank you. Questions or?
We'll bring you back up.
Okay.